Good evening and welcome to the first virtual meeting of the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. We are living in extraordinary times. Both the state of Ohio and the City of Dublin have declared states of emergency. The Ohio legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to have virtual meetings such as this. We appreciate this ability to maintain our continuity of government. For the duration of the stay-at-home order, we will be holding our meetings online and live stream those meetings on YouTube. You can access the live stream on the city's website. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. These questions and comments will be relayed to our board by the meeting moderator. We want to accommodate public participation and comment to the greatest extent possible. We welcome your comments on cases. Please use a valid name and address when submitting your comments, and please refrain from making any inappropriate comments. This is not a perfect system, but we will do our best in these difficult times, and we certainly appreciate your patience. So with that, we'll call our meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please join me for the pledge. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now turn it over to our mayor for the oath of office for our fellow Commissioner Warren Fishman. Mayor?
Very good. Well, first, I would just like to take a moment and thank you. I know you have Jane Fox with you each time you meet, but and I know she communicates on a regular basis with all of you, but how much we appreciate the hard work that the Planning Commission does. Having served on Planning Commission and City Council, Planning Commission is a harder job. You guys do the more difficult tasks. So thank you for what you do, and we sure do appreciate it. But I know Jane tells you that all the time, I'm sure. But Warren, I'm here this evening to swear you in. So if you will raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Warren Fishman.
I, Warren Fishman.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
I will faithfully execute.
The duties as a member.
The duties as a member.
Of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Of the City of Dublin.
Of the City of Dublin.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And the State of Ohio.
And the State of Ohio.
And the ordinances and charter.
And the ordinances and charter.
Of the City of Dublin.
Of the City of Dublin.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Well, virtual handshake, Warren. Congratulations. And you guys have some important work to do this evening. So thanks again for all that you do, and have a wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations, Warren. Please call roll.
Mr. Supalak?
Here.
Ms. Call?
Here.
Mr. Fishman? Mr. Fishman, can you hear me?
Oh, here. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our next order of business, and that's the election of our new chair and vice chair for the 2021 term. Are there any motions for an appointment of vice chair to the commission?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend Christina Kennedy as vice chair. I think she's done a great job this last year, and I'd love to see her preserved in that role.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I have a second. And thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Please call roll.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack.
Yes.
Okay, and next, we will be appointing our new chair for the commission, and I'd like to make a motion to appoint Rebecca Call as the chair for the 2020-2021 term. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Fishman? Please call roll.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack.
Yes.
Great. Congratulations, Ms. Call. I will turn the meeting over to you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioner Graham. We are to the acceptance of documents and approval of minutes. Has everyone had the chance to review the items? Are there any items that you would like to call out? I will
No.
entertain a motion.
So move.
I have a first. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Please call roll.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning and platting of property is under consideration. In such cases, City Council will receive recommendations from this commission. In other cases, the commission has the decision-making responsibility. Anyone who intends to address the commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. The agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. The rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. Anyone who intending to address the commission on these cases, please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this commission?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Do.
I do.
Thank you, everyone. Now we have tonight on our agenda 4 cases on our consent agenda. The following 4 cases on the agenda may be approved by consent if staff, the applicant, and commission agree on all of the conditions. The 4 items are case number 1, the amended final development plat for Deer Run Estates with a single condition, final plat for Deer Run Estates with a single condition, a conditional use for Sundice student tutoring with a single condition, and a waiver review for Town Place Suites Marriott with no conditions. If there's any public comment on any of these cases, the applicable cases will be removed from the consent agenda. Staff, have we received any public comment for the cases on the consent agenda?
We have not received a specific comment. We've just received a comment where somebody was asking about how to access the meeting tonight. So we have responded to that comment, but that particular comment did not identify which case they were looking for to view tonight.
Understood. Are there any commission members who wish to pull any of the 4 cases from consent this evening?
No.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the cases on the consent agenda as read into the record.
Thank
Second.
you, Ms. Fox. Thank you for the second.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call.
Yes. All right, we're in for buckle up time now. We have a couple of previously tabled cases this evening. The first one is Dublin Gateway, the Gordon development at 7270 and 7150 Highland Croy Road for rezoning and preliminary development plan, and Dublin Gateway Gordon development 7270, 7150 Highland Croy Road preliminary plat. This application is a request for a recommendation of approval to City Council for a rezoning with a preliminary development plan of about 45.4 acres from rural district to planned unit development district to promote the future residential and institutional development of approximately 12 acres of open space. The site is northeast of the intersection of Highland Croy and Post Road. Case 2 is for the same site, and the request is for recommendation of approval to City Council for preliminary plat to subdivide the site. The commission will hear these two cases together. And Nikki, are you ready with our case presentation?
I am, thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. As mentioned, this is a request for a recommendation to City Council for a rezoning with a preliminary development plan and preliminary plat for Dublin Gateway. This is the second step in the planned unit development process. Prior to, in 2015, a concept plan was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the applicant has since proceeded to the rezoning and preliminary development plan stage. Ultimately, this application will go to City Council for final determination. The Commission will see a final development plan in the future with all of the final details regarding structures as well as site landscaping and signs. As mentioned, the site is located east of Highland Croy Road, north of the intersection with Post Road, and is approximately 45 acres in size. The site has approximately 3,000 feet of frontage along Highland Croy Road and is about 550 feet wide. Today, the site is comprised of 2 parcels. The parcel to the south contains a historic farmstead and outbuildings, which are accessed via Post Road. The parcel to the north contains 2 single-family homes, each with their own private drive accessing Highland Croy Road. The site is surrounded by established single-family neighborhoods, including Post Preserve and Park Place, with recent development within Jerome Township, just across Highland Croy. It's important to note that Highland Croy Road is within the jurisdiction of the Union County Engineer, and this application has been coordinated on by both the City of Dublin as well as Union County. A bit of case history: this application was originally scheduled largely in this form to be before the Commission on March 5th of 2020. That application was tabled at the applicant's request without discussion. Substantively, this application was before the Commission on January 9th of 2020. At that time, the application was tabled. The Planning and Zoning Commission had raised concerns regarding the alignment of the proposal with the community plan, as well as the density associated with the adult congregate living facility. The applicant has made updates between March and this evening's April meeting. Those updates are extraordinarily minor and at the suggestion of staff. The development text has been updated to clarify side yard setbacks as well as open space sizes and eliminate minor inconsistencies. The updates that were scheduled to be presented to the Commission at their March 5th meeting are as follows and all remain intact with this evening's proposal. The general updates that apply to both subareas A and B include that all reserves will be dedicated to the city, with the exception of the reserve within the adult congregate living facility subarea. All the instances of vinyl cladding and trim have been eliminated from subarea A and B at the Commission's suggestion. Additionally, minor modifications to the text for street tree provisions and plantings have been made. Specifically within subarea A, the adult congregate living facility has been age restricted to 55 years and older, and the maximum height has been reduced from 3 stories to 2 stories and has been reduced from 45 feet to 35 feet in height. Additionally, at staff's request, the applicant also added a maximum height for accessory structures. In regards to subarea B, the applicant has increased the opportunity for diversity of single-family homes by adding 2 additional base building types, which equates to about 15 homes of each building type across the 90 proposed units. They've also eliminated the allowance of fences to be more consistent with the neighborhoods adjacent. And at staff's request have increased the percent a garage door is permitted to a round number, so that is easier to administer on our end. Additionally, there have been commitments made to provide an open space maintenance plan, so single family residential property owners are aware of the commitments and costs associated at the time of the final development plan. And finally, sign provisions have been updated to ensure consistent signs across sub-area A and B, as well as for Post Preserve. In review of a rezoning request, it is always prudent to consider the community plan recommendations. The community plan includes a future land use designation for sites inside the city of Dublin as well as beyond. This site has 2 land use designations. The northern third of the site is designated suburban residential low density with a recommended density of 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre and a traditional suburban character with quarter-size acre lots. The southern 2/3 of the site is recommended mixed residential low density, which permits more diversity in residential housing from single family, attached single family, and low density multifamily at a density up to 3 dwelling units per acre. When calculated across the 45-acre site, the combined recommended density is approximately 121 single family or 2-family residential units. As previously noted, the applicant is proposing an adult congregate living facility, which is not contemplated by the community plan. However, an adult congregate living facility, if contemplated, would be designated as a general institutional use. The community plan does not make a density recommendation for that type of use, however, notes that it should be contextually sensitive. The community plan also includes special area plans, which hone in on character details for specific regions of the city. This site falls within the Northwest Glacier Ridge Special Area Plan. The plan recommends single family adjacent to existing neighborhoods and recommends preserving the rural character of Highland Croy Road. Additionally, the Thoroughfare Plan, which is part of the community plan, designates Highland Croy as a minor arterial. And despite being within the Union County jurisdiction, recommends a planned right-of-way of 100 feet to accommodate future improvements. The character of Highland Croy is a rural corridor character, which is typified by generous setbacks. And you'll notice many of the previously established neighborhoods have that variable 100 to 200 foot setback along that frontage. The most recent planning effort within this area was a multi-jurisdictional planning effort, including Jerome Township, the City of Dublin, the City of Marysville, and Union County. The land use recommendations for this site do align with the City of Dublin's community plan. In detail, this is a proposal for 45 acres divided between 2 sub-areas. The adult congregate living facility is proposed near the intersection of Highland Croy Road and will contain up to 150 units located on 10 acres with open space along the frontage. Sub-area B is proposed to contain up to 90 single-family lots on 35 acres and will be developed in 2 phases. You'll note that sub-area B is bisected by the North Fork of the Indian Run and is protected by a stream corridor protection zone. Therefore, large reserves of open space are recommended. The applicant is proposing 5 new public rights-of-way with this project, as well as 8 reserves of open space and 3 access points. The southernmost access point is proposed to be right in, right out. The central access point is proposed to be full access, as is the northernmost access point. The applicant has modified the proposed development standards based on the feedback of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The permitted uses within these subareas remain the same as previously reviewed. The adult congregate living facility is permitted per the development text to be up to 14,500 square feet per acre at a maximum lot coverage of 70%. Parking is permitted at 0.5 parking spaces to 1.5 parking spaces per unit. The minimum standards for subarea B are designated by interior lots and perimeter lots. The perimeter lots are intended to maintain the character adjacent to the neighborhoods on the eastern and northern boundaries. The interior lots are intended to get at the mixed residential recommendation of the community plan by providing a variety of lot sizes at varying price points. The minimum lot size is just under 6,000 square feet. The proposed lot coverage for interior lots is up to 70%, and the proposed lot coverage for perimeter lots is up to 60%. I'll note that the maximum permitted lot coverage per the City of Dublin's general development standards is 45%. The applicant has also revised the architectural and building materials as well as heights per the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations. I've already touched on some of these modifications. Additionally, open space and connectivity has been contemplated with this proposal. As mentioned, a total of 12.4 acres of open space is proposed. This exceeds the minimum requirement of the subdivision regulations, which is just over 5 acres. Subarea A contains 2 open spaces, and subarea B contains 6 open spaces. There are extensions of shared use paths as well as sidewalks. The HOA is proposed to maintain the open spaces within subarea B, while the city will own the open spaces. The city, however, will maintain all the stormwater functions of the basins as well as the shared use paths. A total of 4 signs are proposed for this development. 1 sign at 20 square feet is dedicated to the adult congregate living facility, and 2 signs at 20 square feet are proposed to be dedicated to the Dublin Gateway subdivision. Additionally, as part of a previous plan to extend access from the post-preserve subdivision to Highland Croy Road, 1 sign is designated for the post-preserve subdivision. As part of this, a traffic impact study is currently under review by both the City of Dublin and the Union County engineer. The study provides analysis of anticipated traffic generation as well as proposed mitigations based on that analysis. At this time, the traffic study has not been accepted as complete. However, its completeness is required prior to City Council review. A total of 8 intersections, 3 of which are new with this development, have been studied. Additionally, trips during the AM and PM peak hours have also been analyzed with this project and will be mitigated. The preliminary findings of the traffic impact study are recommending southbound and northbound turn lanes, as well as a intersection control, most likely a signalized intersection at the Grand Gateway intersection with Highland Croy Road. Additionally, the city and Union County anticipate off-site contributions to the Post Road 161 intersection. Finally, as part of this application, review and recommendation of approval of a preliminary plat is being sought. The purpose of a plat is to subdivide land in order for development. A plat establishes parcels as well as easements and dedicated rights of way. 90 single-family lots are proposed to be established, the 5 public rights of way, 8 reserves of open space, and a remnant parcel for the development of the adult congregate living facility. In review of the criteria in the code, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning with 4 conditions. And is recommending approval of the preliminary plat with 3 conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have this evening.
Do any of my fellow commission members have questions for staff at this point? Mr. Grimes?
Could you give me a little history on the grand entry and the access and egress to the site, 3 versus 2? Traffic, I know you said traffic flow is not quite there yet, but just kind of bring me up to the thinking from the city's perspective so I can understand that.
Yeah, I think based on the status of the traffic impact study not yet being fully accepted, I am going to defer to Tina Waskowitz and Aaron Stanford regarding some of the analysis and preliminary conclusions in the traffic study.
Would you like me to jump in, Nikki?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Tina Waskowitz in the engineering department.
Tina, can you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, let me get a little closer to the computer. Does that help? Thank you. Sorry about that. So there's been kind of a long history with this site and Post Preserve and the connection and the proposed interchange improvements at US 33 and 161. You know, many years ago, over 10 years ago, there were plans to improve the interchange that didn't end up getting funded at the time, but we knew that ODOT was going to require a change in access to the Post Preserve neighborhood that is currently at Perimeter Drive, so just east of Highland Croix, because it was going to be within the proposed limited access right of way. So there were public meetings and city council was engaged with the neighborhood at the time to develop an alternate access point onto Highland Croix Road from Post Preserve Boulevard. And this proposal honors that alignment that was laid out and approved by city council and takes those streets through. And we do actually now, as of right now, believe we have funding for the interchange improvements to begin in 2022. With the current economic climate, you know, I don't think anything's a guarantee, but that right now is our hope, is that that interchange improvement will begin construction in 2022. Does that answer your question?
The introduction of another traffic light at the Grand Gateway, is the idea there, maybe that'll help at peak times, allow people getting in and out? Is that the theory there?
Yes, and those are based on meeting minimum volume thresholds that are set by state and federal guidelines. So the traffic study has analyzed that, and we will continue to analyze that as the study progresses. Right now, it looks like that traffic signal could be warranted with the addition of this site and the redirection of the Post Preserve neighborhood, as those volumes would incur a lot of delay to try to turn left, especially onto Highland Croix Road. And to make that a safe movement, if that signal is warranted, we would expect a traffic signal to help with that safety.
Is there a time frame on the expected finish of the traffic study update?
It hasn't been resubmitted yet. Both Union County and Dublin have made comments on the most recent study that was submitted by the applicant. And Nikki, if you can read that language in the conditions, that might help spell out exactly what the timeline or the schedule based on the meetings might be.
Yeah. So the language in the condition is basically that the applicant coordinate with the City of Dublin as well as Union County to complete the traffic impact study to the satisfaction of the city engineer and the Union County engineer prior to submittal of the rezoning for consideration by City Council. So that really is the finite deadline associated with that. And then also that the applicant work with the City of Dublin and the Union County engineer to develop an infrastructure agreement for consideration by City Council. And typically these are companion documents that go hand in hand.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commission Member Grimes? Okay, Ms. Fox.
I have a question for Tina concerning the roadways and the infrastructure. Dependent on whatever the traffic study, there is an understanding that there will be an expense to develop some mitigation to accommodate the amount of homes here, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there was a slide that Nikki went through to describe that. There's some turn lanes that the developer would be expected to install, and that traffic control, either a traffic signal or roundabout at their main entrance, as well as off-site infrastructure improvements. So potentially along Highland Croy, including widening or additions to the other intersections. I think there were 5 outside of the 3 that they were proposing to install along Highland Croy.
Right, and could you just clarify for me and the commissioners who owns Highland Croy and whose responsibility it is to pay for any development along any infrastructure on Highland Croy?
So whenever we have a rezoning, the site development is responsible for mitigating their own impacts to the roadway network. As far as long-term ownership and maintenance of the roadways, Highland Croy is shared. It goes back and forth between jurisdictions. Union County Engineer's Office actually owns and maintains the frontage of this site. And then further north along Highland Croy, closer to Brand Road, the jurisdiction is actually incorporated into the City of Dublin.
Okay, so in order for this traffic study and all of it to go ahead, there would have to be agreement between Union County and the City of Dublin for not only infrastructure improvements, but maintenance. Is that correct?
The infrastructure improvement, or the infrastructure agreement, sorry, is absolutely right. Yes, that is the document that will be drafted and will need to be routed through the multiple agencies. So both the private development, Union County Engineer's Office, and of course the City of Dublin would all be parties to that formal agreement that would go to City Council for approval. As far as long-term maintenance, if it's within public right-of-way, whichever jurisdiction has control over that right-of-way would ultimately be responsible for the long-term maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the 100-foot setback. When the road's improved, that's something that's pretty valuable along that road. Are we going to lose that 100-foot setback?
So no, the applicant is dedicating 50 feet of new right-of-way with this application. and the 100-foot setback is on top of that, so it will be preserved.
Okay, good.
Mr. Suplak?
Claudia, I sent in a question earlier today. I know somewhere in the report, there is commentary on some comparable coverage,
Right.
communities. But then the history is chock full of concerns about density, right? Be it the scale of the parcel, be it the coverage, be it some of the setbacks. And I guess there's an itemized list of some comparable developments that have been approved relative to coverage. I guess I'm looking for, do we also have some comparable examples about the parcel size of those developments that were approved?
I did
the
forward.
5,800 is the question.
Right. I did forward that conversation to Nikki, and she and I did talk about this because she had put in some of that information into the report. So I'll let her maybe go through that, and then between her and I, we can dive a little bit deeper into any other questions that you may have.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mr. Suplak. The most comparable neighborhood that has been recently approved would be the hamlet on Jerome in 2018. The minimum lot size in that neighborhood is 5,000 square feet, and the maximum permitted lot coverage is 70%, which does seem fairly consistent with the interior lots that are being proposed. That being said, the other two neighborhoods that I had cited in my staff report, which were developed in 2017 and 2015, which are Autumn Rose Woods and the Riviera subdivisions. Those lots are, generally speaking, more comparable in size to the perimeter lots in this subdivision. So down to the nitty-gritty numbers, Autumn Rose Woods lots are required to be a minimum of 9,100 square feet and have a maximum lot coverage of 45%. Riviera has 3 different standards across the neighborhood. The first standard is a minimum of 13,000 square feet and a maximum of 45% lot coverage. The second standard is a minimum of 9,750 square feet and 45% lot coverage. And then the smallest lots in Riviera are a minimum of 7,200 square feet. And those lots, again, are permitted up to 70% lot coverage.
Just a clarifying question, distribution of those units, are we talking 33% across each third?
I do not know the distribution of that. However, the total density of Riviera is 1.22 units to the acre.
Thank you.
I do believe sub-area C has the fewest number of lots. That's the cluster patio homes.
And with that, also keep in mind that Riviera was a very controversial development that happened in the city because it was taking over a formerly golf course space. So there were certainly a lot of things that would maybe not happen in the instance of the Gordon development. 45% is the minimum lot coverage that the city permits for residential. And then as, especially for those empty nester type of lots, it does go higher and higher and higher. And I would say, Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we typically tap out at the 60 to 70 range, especially if we have smaller lots. And typically we do still get a lot of larger houses, even if the lots are smaller. It helps people, frankly, to have less area to maintain.
Thank you. Any other Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. I have a question, Ms. Martin, about the open space arrangement. I'm hoping you can speak to that. Is it standard that these open spaces would be owned by the city, but then maintained by a local HOA?
So it is standard in the city of Dublin that the city of Dublin would own all of the open spaces. We do not own commercial open spaces, which is why we wouldn't own the open space in subarea A. But the city of Dublin does kind of foot the bill, so to speak, for these HOAs in regards to the property tax.
Okay, I just wanted to
and then
understand
in
if this
terms-
was, go ahead.
In terms of maintenance, it really varies neighborhood to neighborhood. It's been done all sorts of ways over time. So we really do evaluate that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fox, did you have another comment?
I had a question for Nikki. Nikki, what is the Post Preserve? Do you know, that's the most adjacent neighborhood. What is Post Preserve's density and lot coverage?
Yeah, I don't have that at the tip of my fingers, but if we did want to proceed to the applicant presentation, I could get that information for you.
Post Preserve, just because I've been talking a lot with some of the former HOA reps there, they don't currently have a formalized HOA, but it would be 45%. That is the regular code requirement. And density, I'm gonna, if I venture a guess here, it's gonna be 1.8. It might be 2 units to the acre, right around there. It happened in the 90s when we had some developments along that corridor that, even before my time, developed in that range.
And when you're calculating units per acre on this partial, I've seen different numbers on it based on all of it, based on including the assisted living beds. So if you were to just take the 90 on the acreage, are you looking at, how do you calculate that? Do you calculate that by just simply dividing the number of single families, or do you actually divide it by square footage of building structure on square footage of acreage? How do you calculate that, and what is the density? What is the actual density of the 90 on the 35.6 acres?
Yeah, so dwelling units per acre is calculated by taking the total dwelling units, so in this case 90, and dividing it by the total acres, which for subarea B is 35.5 acres. So if you take 90 divided by 35.5, that total density is 2.5 units to the acre. And then in regards to the adult congregate living facility, the reason we do not calculate that with the single family residential is because it is a commercial use. And even though it's a residential commercial use, commercial density is done in square feet per acre. So they are allowing themselves a maximum of 14,500 square feet per acre, which is a decrease from the 15,000 that they were proposing in January. And they have completely eliminated the opportunity to get a conditional use to ask for additional density.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because if you just simply do it by the number of units per acre and you increase the lot coverage from 45% to 70%, you could put another third of a unit on top of the land that you're allowing to have so much building per acre. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that it's calculated in different ways. And I think it's important to note that when you allow an increase of lot coverage, you're actually increasing the density of the units per acre because you're actually allowing a larger unit. But if you had a wall between that unit, you might be increasing by 1/2 to 1 unit an acre, depending on how much lot coverage leniency you give. Would that be correct?
And
So we
Jane, that's
would-
really not how we look at it. It is ultimately each lot is allowed a unit.
Mhm.
And the density calculation does not take into account how big that unit is.
Right. But
I think that's really what it comes down to, I guess.
yeah, I
Ms.
understand
Fox,
that, but I also
I-
understand that if you have a standard of a 45% lot coverage, you understand what a unit per acre looks like in Dublin, Ohio, and
Mhm.
or a standard. So you have to appreciate that if you increase your lot coverage, that you would increase the density of that unit per acre, is really what I'm saying.
So Ms. Fox, what you're describing is the difference between density and intensity. So
okay.
I would agree with you that the intensity of something that has additional lot coverage, the perception of that is certainly increased.
That's a great point, Nikki. I appreciate that. The other question I had for you is the community plan specifically calls out that historic structure in the community plan by address as a preservable structure. And I'm just wondering, was there some thinking about, was there any discussion about that structure? Because it is called out as a preservable piece by address, actually.
So you are correct. The community plan, specifically the Glacier Ridge special area plan, identifies that historic structure as something that is an opportunity to save. This project, honestly speaking, from my perspective, started long before I began working on it. So I can't speak to what some of those preliminary conversations were. And potentially that's something maybe the applicant can touch on. As you know, we do encourage historic preservation of structures. That structure is not protected on the Appendix G listing of outlying historic properties, although it would potentially be eligible to be added if the property owner was in agreement.
Okay, and the last question was there any additional discussion concerning more clarity about what would be the development style on sub-area A other than 2-story, because the development text allows for a variety. I mean, one could go back and change that altogether. Was there any other further discussion about that?
There has been no further detail provided to staff regarding that facility, other than at the final development plan, the applicant is committed to providing all those required details, including building elevations.
Okay, thank you.
Nikki, I have one follow-up question. In your presentation, you mentioned that this project between the two sub-areas constituted 101 residential units, single family residential or 2-family residential. I'm trying to come up with what the 31 are. So how the 31 were calculated. So I have the 90 home. That's easy to calculate, but 31, is that based on the calculation of square footage over acreage?
So I believe that was on the community plan slide, and I'm happy to bring that up again if we want to look at that together. The calculation that I was making is that the community plan has these 2 different recommendations. And if you take the acreage associated with each area's recommendations and calculate the maximum density, so you basically take 1/3 of the parcel or 1/3 of the site and calculate it at the low density recommendation. And then you take the southern 2/3 and calculate that at the mixed density recommendation, assuming that you were pursuing residential and not a commercial facility. That's where the 121 units come from. So since the community plan doesn't contemplate this type of commercial facility, there's no way to calculate that in the recommendation.
Thank you for the clarity. Mr. Fishman, did you have one more question?
Yeah, I did. I want to go back to intensity and density. My concern is the project is pretty dense, And with the 70% coverage, we can build bigger houses with more people in them. And when we first heard this case, they talked about empty nesters and small houses and so on. And we're going to do an engineering study based on, I assume, the density. But there's a difference between building a big house with 4 bedrooms with 2 or 3 kids and a small house with 2 people in it. And I just wonder how we rationalize that 75% coverage.
So from a traffic study standpoint, the traffic study doesn't dive into the level of detail of lot coverage. So they, to your point, Mr. Fishman, are looking at the overall density of the project and are not necessarily speculating on the market distribution of the buyers.
Well, that's my concern. I mean, we have places in Dublin where we thought we were going to build small houses and we ended up building big ones, and we have traffic jams around school times and so on. So I just wonder if we are too dense, if we're giving 75% lot coverage.
Yeah, perhaps Tina Waskowitz can speak to that a little further.
Sure. Can you hear me this round? All right. So there are some slight differences in trip generations between residential units. The most conservative approach that we typically take, and that we've taken with the applicant has taken with this traffic study, is that they've considered this a standard single family home. So when they looked at a smaller unit and a duplex, we could have contemplated using a condo trip gen, which is lower than a single family. They're using the more conservative assumption here with the single family. We've also done studies outside of this site around Dublin just to check and verify that our numbers are typically in line with the national standards, and we are falling right in line with those. So regardless of the size of the home, looking at the Dublin neighborhoods, we are generating that average number of trips per home.
Tina, can you repeat your last sentence? It was really hard to hear you there for a second.
So sorry about my sound here. I'm having technical difficulties, but yes, so across Dublin, we have done some studies just to verify that our neighborhoods and our single family homes in particular are generating at the same rate as we would expect when we do these calculations from the national studies and equations that we use when we plug back into the traffic study. And we have found that we are very consistent with the national averages, regardless of the square footage of a home, as long as the style is a suburban single family home.
Yeah, and that's a tough boat for us in planning to be in as well, in terms of what the customer can afford to build on a particular lot or chooses to build on a particular lot. I think that's really where the market drives a lot of those decisions, and we do recognize this in a lot of different neighborhoods. I would say that the first phase of Deer Run, which is Cortona, we would have never expected those homes to be close to $1 million when they first were approved as empty nester houses.
I guess I'm not worried about the cost. I'm worried about the amount of people and the amount of cars generated and the density. And we're at pretty high density, and now we're at pretty high lot coverage. And I'm just concerned maybe the density is too high.
So Ms. Waskowitz, if I could rephrase or summarize what I took away from your statement, essentially, when you're using the traffic studies to see if the intensity and density of a development will exhaust the roadways, you're using national average. And you have recently completed, or more recently completed, an analysis to see if that national average is meted out in our current environment. And the conclusion was, yes, we are close to the national average. So that is still a good benchmark for us to go after with these new developments.
Correct. As far as the trip generation part of that
Thank you.
larger equation, yes, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from commission members?
Just one more, and I'll keep it really quick. Tina, this is a roadway that's caused a lot of controversy because of the heavy traffic. In the best case scenario, all the infrastructure and everything is there that you determine is needed. Will we always have a roadway that's going to be difficult to travel? I mean, are we putting Band-Aids on the roadway as we develop this? Are we, because of the community plan calling for rural character, this is what I'm getting at, because the roadway plan calls for rural character, as we increase the intensity of development, will we just produce more problems on the roadway? Even with mitigation, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty complex question and maybe a little bit outside of the scope of this specific case. I think that, you know, Highland Croy has been a challenge for both jurisdictions. I think Union County and Dublin have struggled a little bit with how to handle Highland Croy Road moving forward. I think there are some conversations that are happening at higher levels about a potential long-term solution, which would change how that corridor looks and potentially increase the number of through lanes. You know, maybe this is something that we get into with the infrastructure agreement with this private site that may become something that we could partner or team with. What really is the responsibility of the developer in this case and in any rezoning is to just mitigate their impacts to the roadway network. So it's a kind of a delicate balance here where we're already maybe feeling a little bit of growing pains on this corridor. But the obligation again is for the developer to mitigate their own impacts.
Correct, right. But it may require, in the future, may it require widening of the roadway, do you think, as development proceeds?
I think that both jurisdictions have seen that potentially in the future, Highland Croy will need to be more than one lane in each direction.
Right, and would that reduce setbacks then that we're struggling so hard to try to maintain these 100-foot, 150-foot setbacks? Would that eliminate those?
So I'll let planning speak to it, but from my understanding, I believe that the thoroughfare plan has the right-of-way accommodated that we would anticipate for a wider corridor, and that the developer would be dedicating that appropriate amount of right-of-way, and the setback would be based off of that wider right-of-way footprint. Okay,
thank you.
Nikki, do you want to offer any clarity there?
Yeah, so Tina captured it. The community plan kind of correlates those two items. So the thoroughfare plan and the special area plan that's recommending those generous setbacks work in tandem. So those setbacks will be preserved for all of those developments that have been approved under this community plan.
Thank you. Mr. Fishman, did you have another question?
I guess the only thing I can say is that I don't know why we're not mitigating as we go along. In other words, the road road isn't completely developed yet. The area isn't completely developed, and I don't know why we don't take each development and make sure it doesn't make the road worse. And instead, this is a rural road. The community plan said it was supposed to stay a rural road, and I can't understand why we're putting more density on it than it can handle without major improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman.
Does that make sense? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Before we turn the time over to the applicant, I just wanted to take the opportunity, since we're discussing Highland Croy in detail, to express our appreciation as a commission and residents of the city to the staff for all of their diligence in getting the traffic mitigation that you have gotten recently installed in the Highland Croix area. We've heard from residents about the new stoplight at Highland Croix and what is that, poster perimeter? I always get them mixed up because they merge together. That light and then the light that's further to the north. And so thank you for all of your efforts. They do not go unappreciated. And I know it's a long road getting there and there were many hurdles along the way, but thank you. All right, is our applicant present?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, we can hear you. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for joining us
as well.
in these unconventional methods.
No, I think we're doing a good job overall. I've been on a lot of these, and I think it helps everyone appreciate a little bit the humanity, right? Councilwoman Fox likes stone. I can see that from her back, and Mr. Fishman likes photos, so I can see that. So, you know, I got to appreciate that.
All right. Could you state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Laura Comack. My office is 17 South High Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. I'm counsel for Schottenstein Real Estate Group, the applicant for this project. So I've got, we're going to share in accordance with the instructions that we received from staff this evening. So, and Wes is running them behind the scenes, super exciting. So in just a second, you're about to see just a short presentation. All right, can everyone see the,
yes.
Scroll down. Okay, good. Can I do, okay, good. We're getting there. All right, one slide at a time. All right, so this evening's presentation is really tailored to the questions that we found most applicable from our January 9 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. You probably already know, because I know that you read the materials that staff provides. We have taken the break in activity to address even the most minor of staff comments, as Nikki pointed out, that are extraordinarily minor and leave no question unasked in terms of the technical aspects with staff. And so all of the items Mr. Sublak had asked last time, those have all been addressed. The main point of this evening is to remind you, or reacquaint you with where we left off and what we think is the most important aspect and bears on every single one of the questions that you just asked, which really is the context of this piece of property and how what we have proposed reacts to and then actually supports what is coming in terms of the US 33 post road interchange, right? And I'm going to show you a few ways. So we're going to proceed this evening. You have a lot of our engineering and technical drawings. What I'm going to do right now is show you my conversational pieces. I'm going to learn to use Wes's thing there. Okay, so this is the agenda. I want to talk to you about our regional context. I want to reaffirm to you the fixed points that are set in terms of how we went about addressing your community plan, and then specifically how we affirmed all of the commission questions and feedback from January 9. Okay, well, I don't want to do it. Hold on. I don't want to overpower the, there we go, one slide at a time. So again, the regional context, when we start asking questions about how something fits into a given community, and in particular, if you zoom out, this is 2 clicks on the auditor's map, you can see that there's already significant proximity to a United States interstate, right? Now, the regional context, you can see as well that the property to the north is at this time, as it sits, in between the major thoroughfare, right, the interstate, and the rest of our community. Ooh, wrong way. There we go. What you're looking at here is a copy of a map from the City of Dublin's own website that forecasts the really significant improvement that's occurring with the US 33 161 Post Road Interchange project. Oh, there we go. This is actually this is the Dublin map, and this is the MORPC map. MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which is one of the funding aggregate sources mentioned by Tina that has worked with ODOT to pool monies and begin what is a significant improvement and a change to the normal character of this area. If you can see on the slide, I'm going to use my cursor here just to show you the area that we're referring to. All of that light red that you see begins to paint a picture. The new freeway interchange makes Highland Quarry Road the off-ramp right up to the front door of this development. This is me, I'm zooming in so that you can understand. There's only so much you can fit within a page, but I've zoomed in here to show you exactly what's anticipated by the planning bodies and the city. So within this framework, a couple things start to become clear. There is a new off-ramp that feeds into Highland Quarry Road. There's a post-preserve closure that then sets a mandated roadway network through this property. And then there's a couple site development items that we know are priorities, and so they get on the priority list to plan around. So let me go again. I'm sorry, I keep going the wrong way. So this is what you're seeing, right? This is how you view our site plan at this moment. And we've gone ahead and we've shown the new roundabout, which is an off-ramp from the freeway, and how that off-ramp effectively comes around and comes right up to our front door here. So when I talk to folks about what is happening in this corridor, what you're looking at right here is one of the discussion points when I go through. This is the red improvement that's about to happen. This is your new freeway frontage for this piece of property in Dublin. It's significant. It makes this property freeway frontage property. Now, to recall from both the staff report, but last time, we spoke extensively about the items that we had to address in this proposal to react to it, but then also to support and recognize that certain things just are set the way they are, whether it be from the planned ODOT improvements, or in this case, what you see on the black is how I explain to folks what's already in place for purposes of planning. So when we think about creating a high quality development, right, this goes directly to Mr. Fishman's questions from last time. We are already constrained with a roadway network that taps in at Stillhouse and Holbein and Springwell. So the reality of our fixed points are the new off-ramp. And it kind of looks like a cyclone there, and I think that's probably the effect of it as well. The red off-ramp, the black roads. There in green is our 100-foot setback, because certainly that's in keeping with the rural character. Highland Quarry is not a rural road anymore, but we are working towards a rural character with our development. And then the yellow, that was a way for me to offset and show you that we gave priority to the perimeter units because we recognize the existing neighborhoods and the impact. But what this property does then, it addresses the reality of these fixed points and see this white area, right? And this is how I explain to folks, this is all we can develop on this piece of property. The areas that are shown there in creamy white is the developable area. Everything else has already been set in place for what has to happen on this property. The roads must be extended, the off-ramp, right, coming up to our front door. And then the other priorities that we set in terms of rural setbacks, and then of course, preserving the swale. So that's the reality. And I'm gonna go back to that for just a minute before I get to the final list, but that's the reality of how this site supports what is already occurring before our development even arrives. So in direct response to your question, Councilwoman Fox, that interchange will set the tone for what happens on Highland Croy Road, because it dumps right out onto Highland Croy Road, the freeway. This is now freeway frontage. And the as important as it is to create a high quality development, I think that we have done that within the confines of what we have been given here. This development serves in a support capacity in accordance with your community plan as a mixed development that's intended to transition from the existing homes to the freeway, because that's right at our front door. And so that's what we have tried to do. Our last couple of slides here are just intended to reaffirm to you that we heard you last time. And in addition to making the commitments during the January 9 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, there's actually a chart that itemizes every request. So the staff request, the zoning request, and the follow-up commitment request from the meeting. That's in your packets already. In particular, each of you had made certain points to us, all of which we had addressed. The summary of the most important things that we discussed from last meeting was the building materials. At the time, Chair Newell had asked for us to reconcile those, and they are to her request and specifications. Recall that we had reduced the height of the sub-area A assisted living to 2 stories and 35 feet, and that we had reduced the number of units from 200 to 150 with the legally permitted age restriction of 55 and over. So those are the highlights that we think from last time that we were able to answer, and I think that directly bear on the questions that you've asked today. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Comack. Do we have from the Planning Commission members, do we have anyone who'd like to start us off with questions for the applicant? No questions? All right, now Ms. Comack, just as far as procedure, what we're going to do is we're going to open this up for public comment. At that point in time, we're going to, after hearing public comment, we're going to come back as a commission. We're going to go through our comments, and then we will save up all questions for the applicant. And we will ask them at the end so that all of the commission members can get, you know, statements, clarification, any comments out. And then if we need to come back up, we'll invite you up after our comments so that we're not having you back and forth and back and forth. Thank you. All right, staff, has any public comment been submitted for this item?
We have not received public comment for this item.
Thank you. All right, commission members, who would like to start us off with commentary on this particular item? Ms. Fox, could I have you start us off?
Okay, a couple of things that struck me. I kind of looked over the history of what we discussed the last time. And I think that the request for the 55 and over restriction was not for the assisted living facility, but from the neighborhood, that when they said that they were small homes and there was a concern that it would overwhelm the school district or whatever, the neighbors wanted the single family homes to be age restricted. I'm trying to find that. I thought it was on page 31 of the history. I can't pull it up quickly now, but my thought was that my remembrance was that the request was for the single families to be age restricted, and in order to make sure that it was really senior living housing, or for the empty nester. I'll just be honest with you. My biggest concern here is I appreciate the applicant's argument that there is a regional change and that there will be more traffic. But I don't believe, I believe strongly that if you have a community plan with future land use recommendations, and that you really need to go back and look at those and decide whether or not when you rezone or you create a change in use, or density, that the benefit outweighs the variance that you give. In this case, this area plan calls for the preservation of a rural district. Now, I understand on the west side of the road that it's changed, but we had no control over that. But on our side of the road, where the city of Dublin resides and the residents in Post Preserve, the expectation is that when they built their homes or they bought their homes, that we would adhere to our community plan. Now, I believe that there's two things happening here. One, we're increasing the density quite a bit and lot coverage, which increases intensity, as was mentioned by Nikki. Secondly, we have sub-area A, which is a commercial use, never intended to be there. And secondly, it takes down a historic structure, which is what gives the rural roadway character. So my biggest concern is that it doesn't follow the community plan. Now, I understand that the community plan is a guideline. So if you were to go to the code, there are a variety of places, and I'm happy to quote them, but there are a variety of places where the plan design in 153.052 B1 speaks specifically to that. So I believe that by giving higher density, changing the character, putting in a commercial use that wasn't intended, taking down a historic property, a historic barn that's called out in our community plan by the address, is really moving strongly away from intent of the community plan. And I worry that if we say that we allowed the hamlet at Jerome, which is quite a distance away, be our measuring factor, then the entire Highland Croy area that is supposed to be rural and have a little less density is just tossed out the window. So how can our residents depend on us to follow a community plan if every time someone wants higher density for the reason that there's more traffic or the region is changing? How do we defend that? So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Before we move on to Mr. Fishman, we did receive a public comment item that came in like right when we were asking for public comment. So
yes,
Claudia.
and I apologize. It was seriously a minute after you had asked me. We did receive a public comment from Mr. Robert Spini, who is at 6800 Royal Plume Drive, Dublin, Ohio, 43016. And his comment says, for someone who lives right next to the proposed development, the density still seems too high for the inner homes, as well as the lot sizes being too small. The 70% lot coverage seems too high as well. The examples given as recently approved being comparable are for patio homes. It doesn't seem to be an apples to apples comparison of what is proposed to be built here. Given the issues with the pending closure of the front entrance to Post Preserve, our entrance needs to move to this new development. The first thing people would see trying to do is get into our neighborhood and around these small lots with houses being too dense on the lot.
Thank you, Claudia.
Sure.
Mr. Fishman.
Okay, as usual, Ms. Fox said it better than I could say it, and I agree with everything she said. I think that's what I was trying to state earlier, that the density based on the small lots and bigger, more coverage is going to cause the lack of a rural road. That's going to wreck a rural road. We knew last time, we knew the last two meetings that the highway was going to come. That was all discussed and so on. But that doesn't mean that we should turn this into a 4-lane highway from a rural road if we don't have to. And we don't have to if we don't have this kind of density. And I can understand the commercial near the highway, but I think that it's too dense. I think the lots are too small. The coverage is too high. If you want to blend with the subdivisions the subdivisions right next to it, and I think if we did get some lower density and we still had the old age home or whatever it's called, we could still retain a rural road and the rural atmosphere. And I'm still worried about traffic problems. I know we're going to have to improve the heck out of that road. And why put more density than the community plan suggests? And so I agree with everything Ms. Fox said, and I think we talked about this before, and I think that the applicant has made an attempt to make some positive changes, but I just still don't think it's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Ms. Call. I want to add on to what my fellow commissioners have already shared. Just my high-level review of this case. For sub-area A, I do think that an ACLF facility does make a good barrier to this community, especially considering that the highway is going to be moving, or the highway will be moving closer to the edge of this facility. And I think that does make for a good barrier. I also live near an elderly community, and it is a good barrier. It's not a high traffic type of facility. So I can say that I generally agree with that as a use condition. I do agree with the comments that have been made on sub-area B from a density perspective. Looking through the plan, especially considering on-road parking availability. I know there are 2 parking spaces per house plus 2 spaces within the driveway, but then on-road parking may be an issue given the density of the community itself. And then of course the traffic study, which we've already talked about. Right now we have three conditions specifically pending the approval of this traffic study, which feels like a really big red flag at this point, that's not been buttoned up prior to bringing to this commission. And I understand that it would be buttoned up and would be approved before going to city council, but that does bring a number of red flags in my mind as well. Those are just my general comments.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Grimes, do you have comments?
Yes. When I look back at the history of the past in the notes, I would say that it looks like they've made significant changes to prior concerns. The reduction in the height of the facility, the spreading out. Again, yeah, I am also concerned about the traffic on that roadway. I'm on that roadway every day. But I think the mitigation, the increase in the 50 feet, making it 150 feet, from there to Brand Road, I mean, that is going to be the key piece to that whole entry going north. And I agree that you can't make one developer responsible for all of that, but it sounds to me like they are making a contribution to this solution. I think it is a good transition from the neighborhoods and into that what will be a major roundabout and exit from the freeway. Probably the area won't get relief until development heads more north and maybe even northwest, where other routes of entrance and egress from the area occur. Maybe that's the only way ultimately that we're going to get more relief out of the area from Brand to Post Road. I think that with the assisted living facility there and the other homes there and the proximity to the healthcare, I think that is all going to be a big selling point for those seniors to want to live in these homes and be close to the medical facilities. I'm not necessarily concerned overly so about the historical piece. I think there's other better historical examples worthy of preserving, but when you come from up Post Road from the east, I think that changing that intersection there is going to happen, and what can you do? What is the best thing you could put there? And an assisted living facility there, I think, would be rather attractive for that location. So I like what they've changed and how they've responded to comments, and I think it's in a positive direction. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Supalak.
So I guess I can be, I'm going to reiterate a handful of different things my fellow commissioners keep articulating. I entirely agree. The sort of commercial, quasi-commercial parcel nearest the thoroughfares is a welcome barrier, a welcome barrier to everything that happens beyond it. There is, I also tend to agree that again, the history on this is chock full of, and even Mr. Speeney's concerns sound chock full of concerns about basically density, but some form of density in the form of density or intensity, right? There is, these communities that we previously in one way or another approved, do make sense in certain pockets. They are worthwhile. They are also a substantial exception to the coverage lot area. They are a pretty substantial variant to sort of common lot sizes. The long and the short of it, I think we all agree, and I think we all know this, but PUD is a special set of rules for this parcel. And we have to be convinced in some regard to move, right? To allow all those exceptions. And I don't necessarily, I still don't think we are getting to the point where we are convinced of that. At least I'm not necessarily there. The density still gives me pause. The density triggers a number of other sort of concerns, which we in part sort of try and adjust for, i.e. reducing the height of the forgive me, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, the ACLU, or you know, lot coverage of the houses and those types of things. There is a concern there for a number of different factors, how it faces and addresses with the adjacent community, how it addresses and faces relative to what we intend for Highland Croy. I do think, you know, it's unfortunate that we have to have this conversation and sort of attribute the development burden. I think we all have, you know, can see the future. The Highland Croy is, the development of it is inevitable. It will become a larger something other at some point. That is not reason to cause the next development, whatever it is, up or down Highland Croy, to bear the burden of all that development, right? Or those types of things. It's, you know, the tail wagging the dog sometimes. But so that is real, but the nature of that aesthetic on that side, the nature of that experience on that side, even if it does blossom into a larger thoroughfare, remains real and desired, to everything Jane Fox said, the intent, right, of what's wanted over there. The density here is concerning. It is a big exception to our standardized codes. If there are reasons we can be convinced of the merits of that, I am not necessarily there yet on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Supalak. I did not hear any questions from commission members for the applicant. If you have one, Mr. Fishman?
I don't know if this is a question for the applicant, but Ms. Fox brought up something that jogged my memory, and that was that the residents were told that the single family houses would be mostly empty nester. And then somebody in the audience said, well, put a restriction on it so we believe you, that make it 55 and over. And they said they would not do that. Okay, so we have nothing to rely on that they are not going to be big houses with loading up the school system. And so therefore, I just wanted to point that out, that if they were willing to make those 55 and over, then we would be much more reassured that they would be small houses with 2 people in them, you know, instead of big houses with lots of kids.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Mr. Supalack?
Yeah, Ms. Komek, if you're still on somewhere, I do maybe have a question for you, right? Part of this is, and I do want to also reiterate, by the way, there is a lot of good in this. There is a lot of good in everything she presented about how it's making sense of the context, how it's buffering those types of things. There's a lot of really, really good here. That said, this density continues to be, you know, rear its head, and I don't know how we get comfortable with it. Where I was going to go was, do we have a sense, a lot of times when applicants present at this stage, and or especially when they are trying to, I'll say, convince this commission that the exception to certain rules, a coverage percent, for instance, is worthwhile. There is a lot of times we are presented with the architecturals, right, like far more developed on that conceptual front, be it elevations, floor plans of actual units, those types of things, albeit in a preliminary stage. Where I'm going with this line of question is we haven't seen anything of that ilk through the history of this project. I don't know that we've seen anything on that side for the residential. There is something way back from 2015 potentially about the architecture and the layout of the ACLU unit. Do we have a sense for the square foot scale of these units? I'm sure the developers run the numbers and has a sense for where they're going on that type of thing. Ultimately, the setbacks, you know, even though we're hearing a 70% coverage, the setbacks don't allow a house to be 70% of the lot. The house still has to abide by a 20 foot setback on the front and the 30 on the back and 5 on the side. It becomes a smaller portion of the total parcel in that aspect.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So Mr. Supalack, to address your question, we did add additional concept elevations, but I think if you recall, your own city attorney referenced this point for the commission last time, which is those are not required at this time. And so we provided the conceptual, and that there will be, we fully expect to provide a lot of detail at the final development time. But your own counsel noted that those aren't necessarily required. Now, aside from that, what I can tell you and what we talked about last time, 2,200 square feet plus or minus. But I think what needs to be restated is that the design of our project here, these are laid out and geared specifically for empty nesters and for maintenance-free living. That's what has been identified as recognized by your council as a priority. And I think Mr. Grimes aptly pointed out that folks want to stay and live in the community. And so it's a key spot. If you note around the corner, Ms. Call, is it perimeter, is it post, as it comes around the bend there, there are a number of senior facilities. I would note that we are actually under the square footage limitation per acre there than the ones that already exist along the perimeter drive. There's a couple points that I think I would like to mention and just make sure we're on the record about this. There's a suggestion that we are not complying with the plan and that you rightly so feel an obligation to comply with the plan. I would like to point out, we are following the city's own plan. The characterizations of a mixed development is not mine, it's in the community plan. The idea of a transition for this property in this area is community plan, not ours. It's probably recognizing the fact that across the street is already zoned for big box retail, which is aptly appropriate at a freeway interchange. As far as the density, that's not correct that we are asking for any kind of exception or that we are asking for more density than is called for by the community plan. In fact, we comply, we are under your own staff's calculation of the density as prescribed by the plan. So given that the plan calls for something different than you are used to, we have tried to transition from what we're used to in post-preserve with similar lots around the perimeter to then move forward to the seniors. So given that all of those things, all of these parameters that we are suggesting, they are not exceptions. They come from the city's own documents and the city's own planning. So this isn't a nouveau concept. It was based specifically
Laura,
from those, just so you know.
forgive me. So when I'm saying the exception, the 70% is an exception.
The exception commonly granted to Riviera and Hamlet, but also
common. I mean, a few examples doesn't make it necessarily common. The 45% is citywide. There are a few exceptions.
Understood. My point to you.
Back to you.
Oh,
Did you have further questions for the applicant? Have your questions been answered? Yes. All right. All right, commission members, back to you. Any further comments?
I do.
All right.
Oh, may I?
Comment?
Yeah, just one more, a couple of more comments.
Yes, Ms.
In Ms. Henschel's comment about the mixed use, in the community plan, mixed use talks about a variety of housing styles, not necessarily mixed use in the way we think of it as commercial. I am not totally opposed to commercial there, but one of the things that I am concerned about and what the neighbors, and I didn't bring this up, but what the neighbors said is that sub-area A is not defined at all as to what it will look like, how it will be designed, how it will be laid out, other than it will be 35 foot high, no more than 2 stories, and it will cover 70% of the lot. It doesn't give at that level of definition and the vagueness in the development text any protection to the post-preserved neighborhood, because I think almost 8 to 10 houses run along that boundary. I think it is important to think about the fact that in the community plan, even though I know that there might be other rural structures existing in the city, it is a gateway to Highland Croy. It is an entranceway to a rural road. It may have a roundabout on it, and there aren't too many places that want to be on a roundabout, you know, for their business or for their home. So maintaining a historic property as a landmark is not a bad idea in this situation. And secondly, if senior living is what they propose on the single family housing, then they should state that it's a 55 and older community and have a square footage on the size of the house so that we can be guaranteed that they aren't more than 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, because that might sell better. So, you know, I think that it's our responsibility to think about how much of a burden we place on the roadway, the changing density to increase the number of families and students and the cost to the city. Every residence we add on is an additional cost to the city. I just think holistically, for me, we need to look at the future land use plan and make sure that we don't deviate too far from it. But that's all my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. I'll keep my comments very brief. I think my fellow commission members did a fantastic job covering their concerns, and I thank the applicant for addressing questions at this point in time. I would agree with my fellow commission members. Like Mr. Grimes, I'm not as terribly concerned with the historic property given its status in the historic property, the historic register, so to speak. The comment from staff about if the owner would be willing, then it could, makes it a little bit of a different animal than an already preserved and entitled historic property. However, if I look back at the notes that I took down from my commission members, they have concerns and do not agree with the staff report that items in the criteria analysis One, the development standard zoning code requirement has been met. Number two, that the community plan and the community plan has not been met. Three, that the general welfare, especially in particular in relation to the vicinity, the residents that are adjacent to this property. And I wrote down my standard quiet enjoyment clause. Number 8, that the adequate measures have been made or will be made to provide ingress and egress. There was still quite a bit of concern that the traffic study was not finalized, though that was partially mitigated with the staff recommendation. Number 9, the relationship of the buildings and structures to each other. Number 10, the density and the setbacks, along with the lot coverage. Number 15 is the traffic study, and then I'll come back and just summarize with number 12. One of the benefits of the PUD product is that there's always a trade-off, that either we're getting clustering of density to provide, a greater open space, or something that balances the benefit received with the amenities provided. And I think that with those criteria not being met is what I'm hearing from my fellow commission members. Having said that, did I get anything wrong? Does anyone want to correct me? I took those notes based on the comments that I heard over the last, half an hour or so. All right. Now, at this point in time, I can ask to entertain a motion, or if there's any other discussion that needs to go forward, or if there is a request from the applicant for a tabling of the motion to bring back at a later time. Commission members, I look to you.
Anything from the applicant?
No, appreciate your comments this evening, and we would ask for you to go ahead and let's forward this case on to council. And we'll continue to work on our traffic in accordance with your normal policies on the way there.
Thank you, Ms. Comack.
Thank you.
So the motion number 1 is to recommend approval to City Council for rezoning a preliminary development plan with 4 conditions from staff.
Do I have a motion of approval or of disapproval?
I would recommend that the motion be made in the affirmative.
I was just going to say the same thing. Thank you, Thad.
Second.
Sorry, that was not a motion. That was recommendation from the legal staff.
Right, just a recommendation on the form of the motion to be in the affirmative.
Move to approve the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Supalak. Would you please call roll? No, excuse me, call for a vote.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
You're
No.
missing.
Ms. Fox,
No.
Mr. Fishman,
No.
Ms. Kennedy,
No.
Ms. Call,
No.
Mr. Supalak.
No.
Thank you, everyone. Now we made a motion, Thad, for procedural. We have 2 items. Do they need to be made separately? Or did we just cover both of them with the 1 vote?
Since you just called the first one, I think you should do the second one as well.
Okay. Motion 2 for recommendation of approval to City Council for preliminary plat with 3 conditions.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Supalak?
Ms. Fox,
No.
Mr. Fishman,
No.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Supalak,
No.
Ms. Kennedy,
No.
Ms. Call.
No. Thank you, everyone. Now, if I can get my paperwork together, we can continue on. A new case. We have case number 7, Midwestern Auto Group, Ferrari. This is an amended final development plan. This application is a request for construction of an approximately 7,040 square foot showroom and sales office as part of a vehicle sales campus, Midwestern Auto Group. The 15.5 acre site is south of Perimeter Drive, approximately 250 feet west of the intersection with Venture Drive and zoned planned unit development district. Zach, welcome.
Thank you. Can we make sure that we have the applicants in the room as well before Zach gets started?
Certainly. Can we verify the applicant's presence?
They are indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Zach, it's all to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, can everybody view the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good evening. Tonight we will be reviewing an amended final development plan for the Ferrari showroom, which is located within the MAG development. Shown on the screen is the site in consideration. This site is located at the star on the map. This site is located at 6325 Perimeter Loop Road within Subarea A, and shown on the screen is just a zoomed in map of where Subarea A would be for your reference. To go over some background and existing conditions for this proposal, back in 2018, there was an informal review that included both the Porsche and Ferrari showrooms. The Porsche showroom is shown on the screen currently. In February 2019, Porsche did receive approval for an amended final development plan for their site in their showroom. With the Porsche application, Ferrari was included when considering the stormwater calculations and any stormwater questions and concerns and within their plans. Engineering is still working with Porsche to finalize stormwater plans. So engineering has included a condition tonight with this application to continue to work with staff to make sure that that is approved at a later date. Shown on the screen is the proposed site plan for the Ferrari showroom. The showroom is approximately 7,040 square feet. Due to the location of where this Ferrari showroom is placed, it does interfere with the existing parking arrangements for the site. Following the addition of this this building, there are 455 parking spaces that are required within Subarea A. Following the addition of the Ferrari building, only 404 are provided within Subarea A. However, supplemental parking is provided throughout the development. Also on the screen, you should see a red box. There's a new battery room that is proposed with this application. This is to act as an accessory building to the Ferrari structure, and is located just south of the Ferrari structure and southeast of the Porsche showroom as well. And just to give you reference of what the building would look like, this is from the northwest elevation. These are aerials that the applicant has provided to staff for the commission's review today. Shown on the screen are all the proposed elevations for this building. You can see that the design does emphasize the modern design established throughout the MAG campus. Showroom can be viewed from the north and west elevations, which can be viewed from Perimeter Drive and the Porsche establishment. The main entrance is also located on the north elevation via the red aluminum paneled structure. Planning staff is recommending that this entrance color, that the main entrance color be revised to match the neutral color palette, which can be seen throughout the entire campus. This was also a comment back in 2018 when this case did go informally, as one of your commission members did point this out as well. The building is a max 23 feet in height to the top of the parapet, which does screen utilities that are located on the roof. Service drop is located east of the showroom. It does include overhead service doors, which allow for customers to drop off their vehicles or pick them up as well. Materials included, which can be seen sporadically throughout the building, would be glass, aluminum, composite materials, concrete, masonry, and stucco, which are all permitted materials within the development text for this site. And the finishing colors are brilliant silver metallic, which would be the lighter colors seen on all the elevations, and a dusty charcoal, which would be the darker colors shown, which can be seen on the west elevation and the south elevation. The applicant is also proposing a wall sign for their brand. The sign would be made of 2-inch acrylic channel letters, which would have a mirror polished stainless steel face. The sign is approximately 25 square feet in size and 20 feet in height from grade. The sign also includes the logo for the Ferrari brand, which would be extended 3 inches out from the building. And this sign does meet all applicable sign guidelines within the development text. And also shown on the screen is the proposed ground sign. This ground sign would be considered a brand sign within the development text for the MAG site. It is 40 inches in height by 23 inches in width. It does have an aluminum face, which would be painted red, and the acrylic logo for the Ferrari brand. This sign does also meet all applicable sign guidelines for the development text. It also should be noted that this sign will not be lit up, but the wall sign will be halo lit, which is permitted within the development text. Planning staff has reviewed this application to all applicable amended final development plan criteria and is recommending approval with 2 conditions tonight. If the board, or if the commission has any questions for staff, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, the applicant is here, the architect is here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to invite the applicant to come forward.
Good
Please
evening.
Hello. Address.
Hello. Yep, I'm Brad Parrish with Arch All, 49 East 3rd Avenue. Thank you, Zach, for the presentation here. Done thoroughly as always. We are back again, obviously, for Ferrari to hopefully finish out the campus here. I don't think there's any more land to build on through the year, so I've made a career of it. So the last building here, obviously, is the Ferrari showroom, which is just a showroom. No service component will be in this building. As Zach said, it's a delivery area for new cars and service cars. The service will be handled in the main facility. Ferrari currently resides in the larger building, and they're moving it over to this new facility. The big focus of this was to really bracket that display area as shown in the site plan. And so nothing more than that. We try to keep the design consistent with the development. And for the red portal, we wanted to give some pop of color to this elevation since it's sort of a higher line vehicle on site. But other than that, I'll keep it brief and take your questions.
Wonderful, thank you. Staff, has any public comment been submitted on this item?
We have not received public comment at all, but we also seemingly have lost Mr. Fishman. So if there is a moment that we could take, oh, there you are. Perfect.
Hi, Warren.
All right. I think we're good to go then. No public comment has been received. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Claudia. Now I turn it over to the commission. Have any of the commission members, do you have any questions for the applicant? All right, do we have any discussion items? Mr. Fishman, it looks like you are ready to go.
Well, yeah, just the one question. Will you agree readily to the 2 conditions?
I wanted to get the feeling from the commission here on the red portal if it was desired by all of you to remove that color.
Mr. Fishman, do you want to start us off with your opinion on the red portal?
My desire is to remove that color. I think we've turned down other competitive auto places to have a logo color like that. And also, when that development was first developed, when it first came in, it was sold as something that wouldn't look like a car lot, and it would be colors would be muted. It would be very tasteful, and we wouldn't use it. I think also we're setting a dangerous precedent. I could bet my car that if we allowed that red that crossed the highway there, we see a blue entrance. So I think that's real dangerous, and I think that your Ferrari ground signs, certainly nobody would get lost. I think you'd always be able to find Ferrari without that red entrance. So I would be totally against that entrance.
Okay, can I get the feel for the rest of the commission members as far as that particular item goes? Ms. Kennedy?
Yeah, I am in agreement with the staff's recommendation as well. I know we've talked about signs in the past within this campus, and I think from a sign perspective and from a branding perspective, we agreed to some colors on the signs that were coordinating colors. But when it comes to the building itself, I'm in agreement with the staff that the red should be removed.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
I agree with the staff. It's the cars that are selling, not the red on the building.
Ms. Fox?
I agree as well. And my suggestion would be that if the dealership is looking for something that would make that entrance pop, there are many materials that are in a neutral palette that you could use that have interest in their texture, in their finish, and that sort of thing, that I would suggest that you stay within the neutral colors, but find something like that to help your entrance look more attractive.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Supalak? You're back on mute, Mark.
I'll be honest, I don't mind the red, but in this context, in the rest of the site, this starts to, while we have sort of had lots of banter about it relative to previous projects on this site, on the MAG campus, this starts to become far more substantial and far more than just a sign. It starts to change the character of the entire campus. I think there are other ways potentially to work in the Ferrari red relative to the building that isn't necessarily this portal, and it might not even be the exterior type of stuff. So I can be in line with my fellow commissioners.
So Mr. Parrish, given the comments that you've just received, are you in agreement with or willing to agree to the two recommendations from staff?
I am. I'm willing to work with staff on a neutral color for the portal.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. Any other comments? I will entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve the amended final development plat with 2 conditions.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Ms. Beal, would you please call for a vote?
Mr. Fishman?
Before you call for the vote, I also just wanted to be in the record that we did not get any public comments.
Thank you, Claudia.
Sure.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Supalak?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. We look forward to seeing the dealership and admiring its products.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye.
All right. The next item for discussion this evening is Ohio State University Medical Campus. Is the applicant present on this item?
Yes, we're here.
It seems like everybody is here that is registered to be here. If you give me a moment to open up my presentation, I would appreciate that.
Perfect. This application is a request for construction of an approximately 272,000 square foot medical office and ambulatory care facility and associated site improvements. The 33.73 acre site is north of Shire Reams Road plus or minus 2,800 feet northwest of the intersection with Avery Road and is zoned as planned unit development district. Claudia will be presenting as soon as the presentation is up, and thank you everyone for your patience. It looks like we're not going to have as late an evening as we originally expected.
I apologize, my files are rather large, so it is taking a little bit of time to get them all started. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commission, and all of our applicants here tonight. Thank you for taking part of this virtual meeting. We are before you tonight with a request for review and approval of a final development plan for the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, which is the last step in the development process for a planned unit development district. And as the chair stated, this site was approved for the PUD zoning late in December. So it has its own unique development standards, its unique development text. And with it being also a public facility as a university, the building permitting would go through the state of Ohio and not the building department with the city of Dublin, which typically would happen. But site permits and landscaping, which are part of the site permits, would go through our department. So it's a little bit unique in those particular aspects. Here's an outline of the site. You remember it, certainly it's not been too long since you have seen it, which was in September. So the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the rezoning of the approximately 34 acres, which is outlined in yellow here.
I'm not seeing any presentation on my
You do not?
No, Claudia.
It's still your file, your drive. It's showing your available files, but nothing has loaded yet.
Okay. Okay. All right. Huh. I do see it. So.
Claudia, do you have multiple screens?
I do not. No, I just have my laptop. Give me a minute. I'll stop sharing. Let me try this one more time, okay?
Thank you.
We see it now. Thank you.
Okay. And then let me start from the beginning. How's this?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It looked just like that on my screen, so I apologize for that. So we are looking at this area outlined in yellow, which is the 34 acres that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended for approval to City Council for the rezoning. And then City Council acted on that in November. So the zoning is in place. And then if you recall, the Planning and Zoning Commission also approved preliminary and a final plat March the 5th of this year that created this particular lot, and also the roadway that is serving this lot from Shire Rings Road to Eiderman Road. This was the site plan that was part of the preliminary development plan that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended for approval to City Council, and that City Council approved. So in the preliminary package, that is what we had been looking at. And there were quite a few conversations about having connections for pedestrians and the public to enjoy the site and be able to partake in the amenities that are part of this particular site. So as I am moving forward to the next slide, you can see on the eastern and western property lines how those connections have been made. So the applicant has provided paths from what we used to call relocated Shirings Road and is now actually called University Boulevard, connections north and south on the east and the west side to get the public through that site and get them onto the site if they choose to do so, as well as having plantings, seating areas, and paths throughout that entire development in this particular phase. And if you recall, this is phase 1 of 2 phases. So you will see another final development plan in the future for another phase for this particular facility. But at this point, you are looking at about 272,000 square feet of development. So you're looking at that ambulatory surgical center and the medical office building. And we have OSU here on the line as well that can talk a little bit more about what those services entail. But it is our expectation that we would see at some point in the future additional development in that eastern portion of the site. The elevation is very similar to what you had seen at a preliminary development plan, with a lot of brick, a lot of OSU type branded materials for the ambulatory care center as well as the medical office building. And you can also on these elevations see a few of the signs that were approved in the development text. And then those are the other sides of the campus, so south and west elevation. This is something I wanted to hone in on, and I know we have folks on standby here as well to talk a little bit about circulation throughout the site, which was something that was discussed in detail. So the areas in green on the east and west side are actually not part of the campus site. However, they are part of the circulation plan, and they have been addressed in the PLAT and in declarations that accompany the PLAT to provide circulation throughout the site and also to the adjacent sites, east and west. So the City of Dublin currently owns both of those parcels still, and we've had a lot of discussions about not just having OSU accommodate circulation, pedestrian activity, but also having that be part of the amenities for the sites that develop in the future to the east and to the west. And then also in the red are the more internally oriented circulation patterns. From a landscape standpoint, there are a lot of sheets in your packets in terms of landscape character, particularly along 33. So one of the conditions we had requested, or one of the things we had pointed out, was in this particular area, there is a landscape wall that is in the building setback, and it was always contemplated to be in the building setback, but the text doesn't speak to it specifically the way it ought to. So that was one of the text modifications that the applicant has requested and that staff is recommending approval for. And then all of these color-coded areas show street trees, courtyard trees, buffer trees, and they've been working with our landscape staff tremendously to make sure that they are meeting all of the requirements that are in place for the district. And then this is a little bit more in detail of what kind of trees fulfill what kind of requirements. It's obviously a very, very large site with a lot of landscaping requirements, and the applicant has done a great job. helping us all out, distinguishing all of the requirements that they're meeting. And one of the things that I do want to point out is that in these areas, east and west, we also have requested a text modification to allow landscaping to happen off-site. That is required, but would typically not be allowed to be off-site. But given that we are doing all these paths, weaving in and out, we felt it was appropriate to allow the landscaping to happen in these areas as well. One of the things that happened at City Council was a discussion regarding outlets for bioswales and how we would treat those in terms of not curbing areas and letting water flow through and cleaning it in that manner. So the applicant has provided that particular detail to address that condition. So I wanted to point it out because that was a particular condition from Planning and Zoning Commission. One other item I do need to point out is that in the development text, we currently have a allowance for one entry feature sign, a main entry feature sign for the campus, which is a 11-foot tall freestanding sign. As the applicant has moved forward to more landscaping and introducing stone walls, a decision has been made to do signs on landscape walls. So it's not a typical Dublin wall, but it is a very modern Dublin wall with the materials we would typically see in a wall. That is not something that is currently permitted in development text. However, from a staff perspective, it seems like it was a very high quality design and also less obstructive than an 11-foot tall sign. So we and the applicant have requested the commission to allow a text modification to permit these two signs on these stone walls at the entrance of the roundabout. This is one other thing that I wanted to point out as well. There seems to be some discrepancies in the sign plans in terms of nomenclature and sign sizes. So one of our conditions is that the applicant work with us to clean that up before permitting happens. So those are the kind of signs that they would have at the entrances to the east and the west of the main entrance. So with that, we have two motions that we are requesting. And the first one would be the minor text modification that I had mentioned. So allow some of the landscaping to be off-site, allow the wall to encroach into the setback, and then also allow the two signs at the entrance as opposed to the one sign at your entrance. So that would be one of your motions that we're asking you to do. And then from a final development plan standpoint, we are recommending approval with 5 conditions. And we've been going back with the applicant a couple of times on some details. We wanted to make sure that the plans be updated to reflect the required number of bicycle parking spaces, and they are shown on the landscape plans after double checking. From a staff perspective, we wanted them to be shown also on the site detail plan. So we would like to keep that condition in place. Wanted to make sure we are addressing all the sign discrepancies between permitting and the text. And then also making sure that the applicant works with staff to do a maintenance plan for their basins. And then again, aerators and bubblers for the ponds are shown on certain sheets, but not all sheets. So we wanted to make sure that that is done cohesively throughout the entire plan set. And then we also wanted to make sure that the applicant can work with staff to deal with landscape mounding along the vehicular use areas along their parking lot to the south. So with that, we are recommending approval, and we would entertain 2 motions from the commission.
Thank you, Claudia.
Sure.
Do we have the applicant present? Would you like to come forward?
Ms. Call, are we not doing questions for staff?
We are.
I do have one.
Okay.
Unless you'd like me to wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Claudia, just one clarification question. Thank you for explaining the off-site landscaping situation on the far sides of the property. Can you clarify who would have the maintenance responsibility for those off-site landscaping pieces?
Yeah, it would be the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Fox.
I have a question, Claudia, I'm just looking back at the preliminary plan or the concept plans that we had, and could you just, I don't know if you have a northeast elevation on the phase 1 medical office building. Do you have that there? The reason I ask that is and it's very difficult without having them both side by side, but it looks as if the corners of the building, the glass tower element or the glass transparent element that flanked both corners of that building, that one side has been removed, but I'm not sure that I'm correct on that.
A minute here. Sorry, my mouse is stuck.
That's okay. I know,
Jane,
and I'm trying to load mine too, and everything's really, really slow.
Jane, when you're asking that, you're comparing the current elevations back to the previous set we saw?
Right. Yes, Mark. And I just need the clear. It looks to me like there's a transparent corners on both sides of the front elevation of that medical office building where the entrance is. But if I look at these designs, it appears as though there's only one corner that has that transparency, which changes the character a bit, but I'm, you know, I'm not sure.
I feel like when we did look at this at the preliminary and the concept, we only saw one view of that building because we only saw a rendered elevation. And I'm trying to see if I have that view, and I can't put my finger on it right now.
There is, I don't know if you can see this, but the original one shows transparencies on this corner, and I'm going the wrong way, and this corner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're there, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if you look at this one on the east elevation, you have that here on the bottom of the screen.
I don't see you sharing.
I don't see it yet.
Oh, you don't? Okay, sorry. Sorry.
You watching this? What is the story on those? Did we take a chunk of glass out of that?
All right, give me a minute and I'll get there.
Okay.
And I don't know if the OSU folks have anything to add to that at all while I'm looking for finding this.
Yeah, this is Keith Myers. We didn't take any glass out that I'm aware of, you know, from one to the other. So
I can't hear them.
They said they did not remove any glass from the last time I saw this.
Out of another corner.
Can he increase his volume? I can't hear him.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, this is Keith Myers. I don't recall taking any glass out of either of the corners. I think it's consistent between the two. It's been partly because the floor plan's been fixed for quite a while, and that glass is pretty carefully aligned with that floor plan.
So Ms. Fox, can you hold up your drawing again? And Mr. Myers and Mr. Underhill, could I have you look at this rendering, if you could center it? Yep. So what she's referring to is on those two corners.
That was a very, very early artist rendition of the building. I don't recall but the plans and things that I'm sorry, I'm trying the best I can. I'm sorry. That was a very early artist rendition of the building, but I don't recall from the time that we've begun submitting and working with staff, we've only had the glass there at the entrance. So that's okay. Now I understand the confusion.
So Ms. Fox, did you have any other questions in relation to that, or was it just something for clarity on what was actually being proposed versus what we'd seen previously?
Yeah, I guess my question was for Claudia, because without having the preliminary drawings in front of us to know the difference and then seeing that, it seems as if that transparent corner has disappeared, it changed the character a bit and gave less interest to the building. I thought that was what was in the preliminary drawing. So I'm just curious how different the preliminary is from the final in architectural style.
And I can't share. It says on my screen, your screen sharing is paused. And even if I'm trying to do resume, it won't let me do it. I apologize for that.
And Jane, for clarity, I'm looking back to the history when we saw this in February, I think it was, and the drawings appear to be the same. I don't see that artist rendering in this particular set from the February 14th Valentine's Day meeting.
Got to go back to August 22nd, 19. I'm not sure why it's not listed on that page. But if you go back inside, I don't know if you have your access to your shared documents.
Yeah.
Ms. Call, if I may, Aaron Underhill here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
We're trying to keep the lines of communication open with all of our consultants, and I've received an email as we're talking here that did say that glass was in fact on the corner and is no longer there, but that the glass was made more expansive facing the courtyard as a result.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Now, Mr. Underhill, is there anything else that you'd like to present to the commission? We'd like to turn the time over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. We do have a couple of other consultants on the line if we need them here in participating, and employees of the university. Of course, you've seen Keith here. I think in general, I wanted to reiterate a few things. I do think it's somewhat ironic that when we started this process, we didn't find ourselves in the situation we're in. With everything going on in the world right now. And boy, what a great project on a number of fronts to be bringing forward at a time like this. Number one, for the obvious reasons of the services that this would have been able to provide in a time like this if it were here already. And then secondly, to have a project of this economic power coming despite what is going on in the macro economy is also just an excellent thing for the city. And, we have to all be glad that we have someone like Ohio State University, an entity like that here that can weather a storm like that and still proceed with a project like this. So obviously, I think we all recognize that. We did spend a lot of time at the preliminary stage when we were going through the zoning of explaining how these things are designed, these buildings, and I think a lot of what's going on in the exterior of the building is a direct result of what's going on in the interior. And we have, I think, over the last several months, learned some things even from the other project that is actually out of the ground at Hamilton Road and 161. And so hopefully we were pretty clear that we thought there could be a little bit of change to the architecture as a result of those ongoing sort of charrettes internally at the university. And we now have a prototype that we're bringing to the city. And we have heavily vetted this architecture internally. There are several steps along the way, and very difficult to get to that place. So while we recognize maybe what we would deem to be a minor change in the architecture here, the reasons behind it are such that they're really driven by the services that are being provided. Lastly, I'll just reiterate the types of services we're proposing here, which are ambulatory care services and medical office. So we'll have everything from your typical medical office visits occurring here to a wide range of diagnostic testing, outpatient surgeries and treatments. And, it'll be a high volume facility here with the ability to serve a lot of people. So we also mentioned, I think, during the zoning process that we're consolidating some of the operations in Dublin into one facility for efficiency purposes. And I think all in all, I can speak on behalf of the university in that they are extremely excited about this site and the ability to come to Dublin and bring this project there. With that, I'll open it up to questions, and I'll tag team it with the other people on the meeting here that may be of more help than I would in answering certain questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. Staff, has any public comment been submitted for this item?
No, there has been no public comment submitted on this item.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, with that, I will turn it over to the commission. Do I have any fellow commission members who would like to speak to this item, like to discuss any items, or like to ask any questions?
I have.
Yes, Ms. Fox.
I have one. It's a question for Claudia, or a clarification for Claudia. One, I want to compliment. I think it's important that we note that the landscape plan and the request for connectivity and an amenity for the adjacent neighborhoods has been really satisfied in a beautiful way. I think that's important to note because it was a request from the residents in the area that a campus this size might be something that had a design quality that they could experience from the outside. So I like that. I really like that. But Claudia had mentioned that because of the walkways, and I think it's important for the public to hear this, that you can correct me if I'm wrong, Claudia, but there is some sort of a deed declaration that this is space for the public to use. Is that
yes, correct? Indeed. If I can you see my presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So those two areas that are in green on the east and the west side of the parcel, they're actually what we would call off-site, but the paths sort of meander in and out of those. And there's also, especially on the west side, that circular path there. There's benches included on the interior of the path. And then there's landscaping accommodated in all of those green areas. And the applicant has worked with the city to really structure their deeds to make sure that they are publicly accessible, but they're also being maintained and are fulfilling a requirement, so to say, that the site would have anyway. So that is being taken care of with the plat.
Okay, and that includes all those sort of blue-green walkways. That's always will be public accessible. And I think that's quite a gift to the city to be able to have that much public accessible walkway. Yeah, I thought that was an important note for the public to hear. Thank you. That's all I have.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Any other commission members have comments? Mr. Supalak?
This is actually more a question, Aaron. I don't know if you're the guy to answer it, and I guess I'm just curious relative to the architecture and the skinning here, which I hear you loud and clear. There's a program is driving this building, and ultimately I can appreciate that. That said, I also sort of raised some concerns about previously the massing here is a little bit basic, and I'm guessing you also have some of your architects and designers in the meeting here. So forgive me if some of this conversation should be pointed towards them. So you know how this goes. We love having OSU. This is a great big building. There's ample opportunity to make it a really fantastic, great piece of architecture. It's handsome right now. It could be amazing type of thing, right? With a few more touches, and there's ways still to do that, even if you have to abide by the program that's sort of driving the inside. There's ways to play with the skinning that still gets you where it's sort of down that direction. Maybe this is the line of question. I know, of course, you touched on it. Hamilton Road is well underway. From everything I gather, from news on that, it basically looks almost identical to this building. Like you'll have bookends sort of there and here. Maybe that's the line of questioning. Is that how this is coming to fruition? Are these two bookends, are they mirroring each other right now? Is the design matching, and/or are there more of those going in around the city? And that's broader than Dublin, but I'm just trying to understand context from like the OSU perspective, maybe on all that.
I'm going to defer largely to Keith Myers here in a moment, who spoke earlier, but I think it's very important that OSU, I would say that yes, these are very similar facilities in terms of their look. And that's intentional as a part of the branding strategy for the university. That's very important. I'll let Keith kind of piggyback on that aspect.
Let's see, so the buildings are similar. They're also different. The Dublin building is bigger. So there's a third floor on the ASC, but a lot of the materials are the same, the brick and the precast. I should say we worked with the firm of Pelle Clark Pelle pretty carefully, New York, on the building facades, and there's been a tremendous amount of detail work in the design of particularly the brick in the facades. So there's a lot of depth to the windows. If you know Pelle Clark Pelle's work, they are really, really good and very fussy about just how that detailing comes together on those facades, particularly with that brick. So yes, the answer is yes. They're going to look like cousins, but they are different, particularly in terms of the size of the ASC.
Thank you, Keith. Mark, did you have any other questions?
No, not at present. I mean, generally, I'll just say I'd still advocate these elevations are less unfortunate. I hear you loud and clear on the detail of the brickwork. That's really valuable in a lot of ways. I feel like the west elevation in particular is in large part, though, a very large, side of a warehouse kind of view. And if anything, if there's consideration for touching some of that up and adding some push-pull, positive, negative, would love to see it, is all.
Thank you, Mr. Subelak. Any other commission members would like to make comments? And Claudia, could I have you stop sharing? It's difficult to see the other commission members, so I can't see hand raises.
Hi, Rebecca. I have a few things to add.
Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Okay, thanks. I am really pleased with this site overall, and I'm really excited about it. I don't have any concerns to share, but I do want to reiterate Council Representative Fox's comments about the connectivity and the outdoor spaces and how pleasing that'll be to have a pass-through for local residents to move through that space. And so I'm very appreciative to see that those modifications have been made. Overall, this looks great. I just wanted to point out, I know we talked about the signs a little bit during the presentation, and having this new sign at the front of this facility will set a precedent. So I think it's very well executed, and I love the way that it looks. But again, we need to keep that in mind going forward as additional properties become developed in the nearby area, so that we keep that in mind going forward. But overall, I'm very pleased with this facility and the landscaping. It looks beautiful. So well done.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Fishman.
I couldn't be happier with the landscaping. I also was a little concerned about the signs with precedent, but I think the building is so large I think that it wouldn't set a precedent. If another large building like that came in and is beautifully landscaped, I think that we could get by that. So I think that it looks great. I love the public access. I love the landscaping. I love the water features. I think it was really beautifully done. Yeah, can't say any more. I'm really happy with it, and I really welcome Ohio State to Dublin.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Mr. Grimes.
I think this is a stellar addition to the city. I think a great anchor to that corridor, and the example that it's setting as it connects to the neighborhoods and adjoining parcels will set a trend up and down from there all into where the university boulevards hopefully will connect someday. So I think this is going to be a tremendous asset. And I thank the city and OSU for working so well together on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Ms. Fox.
Yes, I just have a question. I agree with Commissioner Supalak about especially on the south elevation, the long length there of the 3 stories. So my question would be, because this is phase 1, the east end of that would be phase 2, I'm assuming, which would then mean that there would be probably another 4 or 5 story building flanking or kind of bookending that. Is that the future thought on this?
I think it's 3 actually.
3? It's another 3?
Or Dan, is it 3?
If we get on the other side of the ASC where, potentially there could be more in-bed hospitals, it would probably be taller. And I think you're correct. It would be 5 or 6 stories on that.
Okay.
We went. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. I tend to agree that it would be nice if one had the choice here to break up that long length, but and I do see where there's been an increase in it looks as if that the glass corner is wider than the original design.
I apologize for the confusion on that. It's been that way for so long since we've seen you last that I just couldn't remember from the artist rendering, but the thing's been like that for a while. I couldn't understand why
Right.
did we use that? I apologize.
Jane, just in their also defense on that, that's common, right? Early on, you do the rendering in order to help demonstrate the concept, but you don't have everything inside figured out, and thus as things continue. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's fine.
I'll just add, I could add one thing. Hey, this is Dan Light. Good to see everybody. Regarding that southeast elevation, on the inside, we really wanted to promote the use of the stairs. So the actual stairwell is within the glass, so you can see that. And so right when you come into the medical office building, that's the entrance. And so people really promote utilizing that. Those are some things that we learned from past medical office buildings where we put these stairwells inboard, and people that actually want to ambulate and use the stairs are forced to use the elevator, and they don't like it. Some people don't even actually like to use the elevator. So that was one of the reasons why like Aaron said, some of the function of the building, you know, drove the architecture on the outside.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Just a quick straw poll. I heard a couple commission members not in super favor of the two signs, the wall signs, the stone wall signs. Could I get commission members' feelings on those signs? Just a thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. All right. Staff, has any public comment been received on this item?
We have not received any public comment. And if I may, we had asked the applicant to kind of do that sign in the very first place during the preliminary development plan, and they didn't choose to use our advice. So I kind of want to do the tutorial sedans, but you know.
What was that, Mr. Underhill?
So we finally came around to a great idea. Good job, Claudia.
We liked it.
Oh, thank you. All right. So at this point in time, I will entertain a motion number 1 to approve the requested 3 minor modifications.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. I have a second motion to approve the development text final development plan with the 5 conditions listed. Before we take a vote, is the applicant in agreement with all 5 conditions on this item?
Yes,
I
we
see
are.
a head nod from Mr. Underhill. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to.
So moved.
Second.
I'll take Ms. Kennedy's. Do we have a second?
Second. Oh.
Mr. Grimes, thank you. Could you please call for a vote?
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, enjoy your evening. Mr. Underhill, Mr. Myers, and Mr. Lang, thank you very much for joining us this evening in this unprecedented
That it is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Staff, do we have any communications for this evening?
I have a couple quick things. I have a couple of things if you give us a minute here. I have created packets with plans for you all per your request. And it's just, it's not staff reports, but it is all the plan sheets for the various cases for your next agenda for the meeting next week. So we had some internal discussion with a hope of a compromise that you all would be able to come and pick them up from our city building at 5800 Shire Rings Road tomorrow or Monday, whatever your convenience. I'm here both of those days. So if that works for you, if not, and you need special circumstances, definitely let me know and we can accommodate that. But if you would all be willing to do that while you were talking, I have created your packets for you. So they're ready for you first thing in the morning. So, which is how I started my career in Dublin, is making packets for you 17 years ago. But you know,
thank you so much.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I figured out how to print everything.
Okay, well, no longer. We have them for you. So
We need to contact you in advance before we get there, or is the building open?
If you use my city cell phone number, which I provided at the beginning of the meeting, and I can provide it again once we're offline, you all can send me a text or call me in the morning, and I'll just make sure whatever time of day I'm here, I'll be here from 8 to 5. So
thank you.
And then there is a doorbell. The building is not open, but there is a doorbell. So we can always put them out in the front. So whoever is manning the bell that day would be able to get you your packet as well.
Thank you both, Jenny and Claudia. That's very appreciated.
Sure. Yes, very much. Jenny, forgive me. I can't find my piece of paper with your number on it.
Okay, I'll give it to you when we're all done here, once I stop the live feed here, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
You mean you don't want that on YouTube?
Not really.
Although you can all track me down, so it's okay. It's not that hard. Anything else?
Any other communication items for us?
Just the only other thing is that we then are scheduled to also have a meeting a week from tonight. So that is the 7th of May. And we were not planning on doing a mock practice for that meeting. We'll just go at 6 o'clock like we did today. And the agenda will not be as heavy as it was tonight. We just really wanted to try to get some of the backlog taken care of. So with nothing else, we would see you again same time next week.
Perfect. Mr. Fishman.
I just want to congratulate staff for the incredible job they've done, and the extra help I got, by the way, and the work with the hospital and the other cases. I mean, this staff keeps proving to me that they're the best in the country. I mean, I'm
Thank
just
you.
really impressed, really impressed.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yes,
And the rest of us share Mr. Fishman's opinion. So that is not just one council member's opinion. So thank you very much. It is appreciated.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate your patience as we work our way through this. So definitely a team effort for sure. So
And I'm sorry I'm hurting you all. Like,
no worries. Any other items for discussion this evening?
I have.
Oh yes, Miss Kennedy.
Will we plan to have a chair and vice chair prep meeting next week or no? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a day yet for that or no?
We don't. I can send out an email with some options tomorrow if that would be helpful to you all. And we can figure out what that is. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
Well, for a jammed-packed agenda, it's not too terribly late in the evening. So thank you everyone for your efficiency, for your diligence in preparing for the meeting from a staff perspective and from a commission perspective. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
You
did a good job.